Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Rushcliffe series. This is the southernmost district in Nottinghamshire and it contains 59 civil parishes of England. And there's some corkers down here. Let's dive in and check one out. Welcome back to Rushcliffe again, people, and once again we find ourselves here on the banks of the River Trent. Now behind me you can see we have a farm track. It's a lane that leads to a farm, and if you were to drive past this on the road, which you can hear behind the camera, you'd probably think there's nothing really of note up there. Well, you'd be wrong. Welcome to the parish of Shelford. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Shelford, shallow ford. This week in Rushcliffe, we're in the parish of Shelford, which is both on the southern and the eastern banks of the River Trent. Its name means shallow ford, which suggests this was one of the places where actually walking through the Trent on foot was possible once upon a time. It'd be a little bit difficult to do that now, that's for sure, although it was for a time possible by way of a ferry. The history of the settlement goes back centuries, as archaeological evidence has previously revealed that as early as the Bronze Age there were people here. These early dwellers were later followed by the Romans at the beginning of the first millennium, and then the Anglo-Saxons during the 5th and 6th centuries. From the time of the Norman Conquest and the recording of the Domesday Survey, there's been a permanent settlement at Shelford. This tiny village seemingly in the middle of nowhere has played a vital role in the history of Nottinghamshire. This was the location of Shelford Priory, a former Augustinian house that was founded by Ralph Hounslow in the 12th century. Later it was the scene of a major battle in the English Civil War when the royalist garrison of Shelford Manor was taken on the 3rd of November 1645. Shelford is certainly not a place that should be ignored. Let's go and see exactly why. We start on the outskirts of the village on a seemingly nondescript little farm track, but this site has a heck of a lot of history. This is Shelford Manor Farm, which stands on the site of an Augustinian priory. Dedicated to the Virgin Mary, it was founded by Ralph Hounslow in the mid-12th century and was eventually dissolved by Henry VIII in 1536. Following dissolution, it was granted to Michael Stanhope. In and of itself, the priory wasn't all that important. It was only a small monastery after all. Little remains of the priory today, but in 1600, Shelford Manor was built in its place. And it's arguably that which is the most historically important part of the site. Shelford Manor was the scene of a battle in the English Civil War. This battle is known to historians as the storming of Shelford House. Shelford House was a royalist outpost and one of a group of 4 strongholds designed to defend the strategically important town of Newark-on-Trent. The others were Belvoir Castle, Wyverton Hall and Thurgarton House. It was owned at that time by Philip Stanhope, the first Earl of Chesterfield, who had been summoned to Parliament in 1640. He took the side of King Charles I in the threatening conflicts. When the English Civil War broke out, Shelford Manor was garrisoned under the command of Stanhope's son, also called Philip. The manor was described as a fortified house surrounded by a very strong bulwark and a great ditch partly filled with water, with at least one drawbridge. The whole thing seemingly resembled a mini castle. It was still no match for the parliamentarians though. As much as they tried to defend it, the royalist army, mainly Catholic soldiers, was overwhelmed. The parliamentarian force, led by Colonel General Sydenham Point, attacked the house on the 3rd of November 1645. The majority of the defenders were killed, and the house was burned to the ground. With the royalist garrison having lost 80% of its men, the storming of Shelford House was a highly violent affair. While the amount killed was relatively small compared to other massacres in the Civil War, the violent nature of the assault was off the scale. The battle has been compared in historical circles to similar events at Bolton in 1644 and Leicester in 1645. The irony of it all is that it could have been less of a bloody affair. Point originally issued a formal offer for Stanhope to surrender peacefully, but he refused, saying, "Sir, I keep this garrison for the king, and in defence of it I will live and die. And your number is not so great, nor you so much master of the field, but that I am confident soon to lessen your number and see you abroad, and for relief we need none. Therefore I desire you to be satisfied with this answer. From your servant, Phil Stanhope." His reply was rather overconfident, to say the least. Our main walk starts on West Street, which runs down the western edge of the main village cluster, a name that stands to reason then. It's a simple enough road lined with a variety of housing styles, all with their own quirky characteristics. Towards the halfway point of the street is a small opening, and if you investigate it you'll see it belongs to a playing field. It sports a pretty large open green space, a playground and a moderately sized football pitch. It may look peaceful here, but when the storming of Shelford House is reenacted, West Street is one of the roads on which it takes place. At the end of West Street is a big white house. That's the vicarage, which means the church is close by. Dedicated to St Peter and St Paul, Shelford's church is medieval in origin, dating back to the 14th century. It was heavily restored between 1876 and 78 by Ewan Christian and contains an organ acquired from St Catherine's Church in Nottingham. Note the clock on its tower. It was added in 1880 by G&F Cope of Nottingham, but it replaced a much earlier timepiece by Richard Rowe, dating way back to 1680. The tower was used by the Royalists during the siege of Shelford Manor. Now, a little bit later on, when we've done this main walk around, we'll be taking a little drive down the lane that runs down the side of the church. That runs towards the River Trent. And if you've been following my journey through Nottinghamshire, if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that there used to be a ferry over the Trent in these parts. It went to Stoke Bardolph. I covered that in the Stoke Bardolph episode. Well, we're going to go and see where that ferry used to cross from this side a little bit later on. We've still got the rest of the walk to do first, though. So let's turn the camera around here. I'll show you where we are. There's the church again, and we're continuing to the east down towards a junction, and when we get to that junction we'll be taking a right turn and forming a nice neat little loop around Shelford village. Next up is the village hall. This was previously a Church of England school built in 1873 by the Earl of Carnarvon and later taken over by the Nottingham Education Committee. The school closed in 1964. The building belongs to the Crown Estate and is leased to the parish council for use as a village hall. The old schoolhouse is over the road and that's now in residential use. There is no school in the village these days. The nearest ones are in East Bridgeford and Rushcliffe-on-Trent. I had to laugh, by the way, at the name of this house nearby. It's called Starbucks Cottage. I guess someone likes coffee. At the end of the road is a small green upon which there's a big rock. That's the Millennium stone and it's engraved with the words Shelford and the year 2000. Nearby Newton has a similar stone at the entrance to their village. The two used to be one parish after all. A quick look to the left reveals the local boozer. This is the Earl of Chesterfield, which takes its name from the Stanhope family. The building this occupies used to be 3 separate structures: a beer house, a Methodist chapel and a Methodist hall. Before those, the site was occupied by 2 small cottages, which were attached to each other. Now you can get to the pub using a bus. Shelford is served by the Rushcliffe Villager, which passes through on its way from Nottingham to Bingham. The pub isn't the only business in Shelford, far from it in fact. Several small farms operate here, engaging in both arable and livestock farming, although much of the harvesting is contracted out to outside companies. You can tell this was a village that was very much built on farming, even if a lot of the residents commute now. Walking down Main Road treats you to some more gorgeous farmhouses and cottages that date back centuries. Okay, so basically the rest of this road just loops around in a nice neat little curve and goes back to a junction virtually where this walk began. There's only really one or two other sort of main landmarks. One of them is a war memorial, the other one is a pinfold, and of course we all know what those two are both for, so we're not going to spend too long talking about them. So yeah, we'll just complete the route and then hop in the car and go and see where the ferry went from, eh? The vernacular of the village is red brick and red pantile, with most of the important buildings under slate. In terms of listed buildings, Shelford has 7, but only 2 of them are houses within the main village cluster. The other 5 are the church, the war memorial, Shelford Manor, and 2 other buildings relating to it. Here's a parish notice board next, so let's get this one marked off. Rushcliffe is down to 23. We're motoring through it, guys. Following that, we have the old red phone box. A couple of years ago, this contained a local history trail, but it seems to have disappeared now. Just after that, there's a pair of newish housing clusters, emphasising the change in Shelford's demographic in recent times. It has always been an agricultural community, true, but the parameters have now changed. At one time, there were up to 30 acres of willows growing near the manor house, and villagers harvested the stems to supply local basket weavers. It's a dying art now, practiced not nearly as much as it used to be. Just as the road starts to bend left away from Shelford, the War Memorial comes into view. This displays the names of all those from the village lost in both World War I and World War II. The memorial sits inside the old pinfold. By the 20th century, the site of the pinfold was derelict and was given to the village by the Earl of Carnarvon for the erection of the War Memorial. It was built in 1920, and the work involved carting materials and erecting fences, and it was carried out voluntarily by parishioners. As well as raising the money for the memorial, they also restored the church bells as a commemorative project. This included recasting the 5th bell in 1919, which dated from 1754. There's a roll of honour board in the church's chancel, which testifies all those lost to war. Okay, we are all the way around the main village of Shelford, but of course there is that one thing left. We now need to take a drive out towards the river and have a look and see where the old ferry used to be. So here we are then at the end of the lane that leads to Stoke Ferry, which is what this little, I suppose there's a little hamlet. There aren't really any houses down here, but yeah, it's called Stoke Ferry on the map. And over there you can see the hills in the distance. Those are the hills that we were walking on in the likes of Neaton and East Bridgeford, all those kind of places. And this way, you might be able to recognise a few of these landmarks. In the distance there, you can see the pub on the other side of the river. That is at Stoke Bardolph. I'm sure you remember that episode. The Trent is sort of along this line here, where my finger is. Burton Joyce is over there. So yeah, I should imagine this is very familiar to you if you have been following me around Nottinghamshire. Now, it's a little bit of a walk here down to the river because you can't drive the car all the way down this lane. It's blocked off just up here. So we are going to have to walk it to actually see the river, but that's all right, I don't mind. It'll take me about 2 or 3 minutes, I think. The river's not too far away. So I'll see you there in a sec. As we already know from Stoke Bardolph, there used to be a ferry over the Trent here. Although it's long since disappeared, the wooden structure tethering the rope for pulling the ferry can still be seen today on the river bank. As well as providing a link between the banks, the ferry likely represented the shortest route into Nottingham from here. Its records go back to 1275, and it operated until the middle of the 20th century. There is, though, no definitive record of when it last ran. It always ran on an on-demand basis, latterly being provided by an elderly ferryman with a rowing boat. And there you go. That is the parish of Shelford. And it's quite nice, isn't it, that you can walk up to this up to the bank of the river here and look across to Stoke Bardolph. You know how much I like that village, and I'm sure you guys did as well. And you can see it in a different light from here, can't you? It's absolutely fantastic. Now, time to move on to the next one. Now, Shelford used to be within a parish which was a lot bigger, but it split away from its near neighbour not so long ago. And, you know, if I'd been doing this a few years ago, I would have been making just the one episode, basically, going around Shelford and its neighbour. But now, of course, they are two separate places and they are going to be two separate episodes. So I'll get myself over to that village now and we will cover it and see what's there. I'll give you a clue. It's got a big connection to the RAF. And that's that, folks. Shelford is in the books, and yes indeed, had I made this episode a few years ago, it would have been a lot longer. Join me in 7 days' time as we explore the second of the two villages which used to occupy the same parish boundaries, and the reason for their split will become abundantly clear. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.